Hi, everyone. Welcome back to SOC Quarantine Diaries. This is episode number 7, and I am so pleased to be joined today by Amanda Fennell, CSO of Relativity, which is a Chicago-based provider of e-discovery. They make a cloud-based and on-prem e-discovery platform, which helps companies manage large volumes of data for things like litigation, investigations, and compliance. And we're going to be chatting security. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. You sound better at pitching relativity than I do. That's awesome.
Well, thanks. I'll keep that in mind if this gig doesn't work out.
Right.
So you've been at Relativity for roughly 3 years now, and we were talking prior to this that it's been a real maturity. Certainly a learning experience for you, this being your first C-level security role. But here you are now in your 3rd year, and you're feeling really good. And the premise of SOC Quarantine Diaries, of course, is based on everything that has happened this year and has sort of thrown everyone for a loop with COVID and the ensuing quarantine, and certainly security professionals as well. So here you are in your 3rd year, and then COVID hits. So how has that impacted what your day-to-day is like now versus before?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess you probably hear this often, 6 episodes later, right? But I think that for all security, fundamentally, my strategy has like the same 2 vectors that I go over. And so I had to reevaluate it. And part of that is the prevent, detect, respond, like fundamentals, not going through kill chain or MITRE or KPEC, but just fundamentals, prevent, detect, respond. We had to reassess how we were being preventative or detecting or responding. So that had to change. And in order to do that, we did that by reassessing our people, what they were doing and their roles and responsibilities, their process and how they went through it. Like you can't just like send laptops back in if somebody terminates, like COVID. And then the technology, like what are we using to monitor that stuff and so on. So we use these 2 strategies typically with our strategy pre-COVID. That was the way we approached our strategy and security. And then post-COVID, we had to reassess those.
So tell me, prior to, is a large majority of your workforce now working from home, or was there a lot of remote work that went on prior?
It was not a remote friendly culture, and I was the only remote executive. So I can tell you that that was quite an uphill battle, but it has become remote friendly. And we are actually still 100% remote and not back in our offices we're global across the world. And so we have to consider everything per geography. So like, obviously, if there's Hong Kong, they have a very different formality of the way they're approaching the process versus Chicago's headquarters. So we're a lot more remote friendly, but it kind of opened up a huge attack vector for us that we had to reconsider, that I no longer could control the monitoring of things via VPN per se, or how good a network was secured when it was a home network. You stopped hanging out on my networks and you started hanging out on your home network. And so that caused a huge separation of like how we were going to approach it and how we approach it now. So it's very different.
Right. So what all went into that? I mean, when this all happened, you probably were assuming it was going to be a short-term type thing, and maybe there wasn't as much planning that needed to go into it. But I guess that quickly changed.
So no, I knew it was going to be long-term.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was
suspect
going to be back in work potentially next week, but.
Yeah, no, I actually moved my team to be 100% remote before the rest of our company, or before COVID was like March 15th lockdown, et cetera. I got a little bit of smack talk from the rest of the execs on that one. When the entire security team goes remote, it makes people start getting scared. And I was like, no, we're stress testing. We're stress testing. I was like, no, we're preparing. I wanted to make sure that we were not going to be like trying to catch up with the rest of the company when they went remote and all of our logs became something very different. You know, your user entered behavior analytics kind of goes out the window whenever your profiles change like this. So I needed us to preemptively, I mean, that's that preventative focus that we have. So I knew it was coming, and I sent the team remote before, and I knew it was going to be long term. And thankfully, I'm actually in charge of like the crisis management of the company too. So I already had a process and a run book, and we already knew who the best response group was, and we already had all that stuff put together. We did refine it For sure. This was like a great stress test of it. It's better than a tabletop to go through it. And so we refined a lot of things with it. But I think the really big way that we've done things differently that was a little unique is that, you know, and this is something I'm sure you've seen in the stuff that I've talked at, like, I don't believe that people are our weakest link. I believe people are actually our strongest link that's left. When my process fails and my tools fail, the last thing I have between me and the iceberg and the Titanic is the captain at the ship. And so I believe that you need to empower people with acknowledging that human instinct is like your best savior when it comes to a phishing email or whatever, right? So instead of deciding like, oh, we're going to put in a whole bunch of tools that are going to monitor people's home networks and things like that or stuff like that, I instead started an education series about how to fix your home network to be more secure, how to make sure that your kid's Zoom situation is secure, et cetera. Like, and we focused on teaching and enabling and empowering the people to make better decisions so that they own the security story. Like, it's not just about my team, Calder 7, like doing all the work behind the scenes. We're actually like reaching out, making sure that they feel like they're a part of that team.
Right. So you're not treating them like there's some sort of risky part of your organization. Because the idea is you don't want to talk down to folks, right? And you have to trust that users are never going to be fully equipped in the way that for these things that maybe the security team is, right, with the knowledge and such. But I guess treating them like adults sounds like what you were doing, right?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I'm in a company with like a ton of engineers, and engineers are flipping smart. And so we've also, like, beyond COVID, we approach things differently. We don't just roll things out like typical security. We actually embed people. You know, when you roll something out, let's say we rolled up like Proofpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of changes take place from a user experience as an employee with like how that works with your email and what's getting filtered or whitelisted, et cetera. And there's a little bit of time that takes with the testing and so on. Instead of just like rolling it out and communicating it, we actually have a security advisory group, the SAG, that we took all the people that talk smack about security and all the people that talk smack about why are they doing this and things like that about our things that we do. And we created a group and we said, we love that you have a dissenting voice. How about you help us make the experience better? So instead of just like talking bad about it, why don't you make it better for everybody in the company? So when we move for things forward in their experience with stuff like the home experience and things like that, we actually pull those people in and help us to explain everything in a way that they know what we're solving for and that we're making the best decision for security and that they help us guide the employee experience too. So it's like my way of attacking things is not to cause that like security us versus them dynamic, but instead make it feel like we're all like that phalanx, you know, for 300, like we're all shoulder to shoulder and we're all doing this together. It's definitely a different dynamic than I've seen before. So I didn't know if it was going to work. Fingers crossed, it's been working so far these past couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read a tweet recently that went semi-viral, I guess, and it said, and I actually wrote it down here: the longer I work in InfoSec, the more strongly convinced I am that security people need to be deeply embedded in the day-to-day workings of their organization, not to interject friction at every point, but to understand how the business works and what the priorities are. That sounds a little bit similar to maybe what you're talking about, just security is sort of playing a...
Yeah, that's a great tweet. I didn't see that. I don't hang out on Twitter as much as I should. I'm still like struggling because Instagram's got me. But I will say that there's a few things that are like the action items from that I'm hearing. One of them is like I report directly to the CEO. So I'm in every executive meeting and I'm in executive meetings probably like 15 to 20 hours a week. So every business decision that's taking place, security is right there. We have a subset team of the technical leadership with like the CTO, the CIO, the chief marketing product officer, et cetera, like a sub team, and I'm in that. So every decision we make on the roadmap, every decision we make to reprioritize something, security is number one. It's like a fundamental backbone. But at the same time, I don't take that lightly. I don't like put the block down on something easily to say like, yep, that's insecure, you can't do it that way, or that's not within our controls for our framework for ISO or something. Instead, it's okay, what are we solving for? And how do we most effectively support the business to accomplish this, but in a secure fashion? Because I have an honor and an obligation for the data that I'm hosting and being careful for. And I think that everyone in the company feels the same. So I'm pretty lucky. So it's that top-down leadership that you get from the CEO, the commitment to security, that it is present and in the room for all those decisions. That's a really great tweet is all I'm going to say on this summation of that.
No, for sure, for sure, and then again along those lines of really where it sounds like your role extends well beyond just certainly from a siloed perspective, right? So your role certainly extends to your customers as well, and I'm sure a lot of them have security concerns when it comes to using a product such as yours, right? And especially with the product moving to the cloud. So can you talk a little bit about maybe just again with the backdrop being sort of the COVID era, but have your customers reached out with any new concerns that they may have now?
Yeah. No, it's the opposite. Everyone wants to go to the cloud all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
So gratefully we have a cloud product, but it was interesting, especially in like the legal industry and the legal tech realm, like no one could get to the office, and in the government and so on, like you can't get in there. So everything had to move to the cloud. So people either go directly. So yes, I have the security of the company, the cybersecurity, the security of the buildings, and I have security of the product. So all that fall, and the compliance of it. So those are all under me, and the privacy. I'm just going to keep going, just gonna keep listing things. But so all those things fall under me. But when it comes down to the COVID dynamic, like the one thing that really pushed forward was the fact that everyone had to get access to data, but not get to it hands-on. So everything pushed to the cloud. So I think the things that came in handy are, the Cloud Security Alliance. It's easy whenever you say, yes, I'm a part of that alliance, and here's my questionnaire filled out. Here you go. And that kind of checks a box for a lot of people to know that the cloud's secure according to that alliance framework. The certifications come in super handy. You have to have that ISO 27001. Your SOC 2 Type 2 report is great because there's so much transparency in how you secure your product in the cloud. So you can just hand that over to people. The pen test results, those things stayed the same in terms of what people asked for, but there were a lot more requests. And so while there are some areas and industries that were really struggling because everybody closed up their budget and no one wants to buy anything during COVID, the one thing they did need was access to data. And the only way to do that was in the cloud. And so we had a lot of shifts there. So the questions stayed the same, but there was just a lot more of them, more frequency.
Tell me a little bit about security operations. Do you guys have or prior to COVID, was there a physical like on-premise SOC? Do you turn over some of those duties to a service provider? Take me through your security operations, generally how that's modeled.
Yay. This is like my background, so I like this part. So we have a product security team, which I'm going to separate because let's just put that to the side for a minute. That's very much focused on like how we secure the product, the code, the pen testing, and all that kind of stuff. So we'll put the product and the cloud. So we'll put that to the side for a second. We have a compliance team that does operational risk management. I'm going to put that to the side for a minute. And then we have a global team, which is located in Poland. I'm going to keep that team here for a second to talk about. And then we have our cyber team.
I'm following.
So those two teams work together very heavily because of the follow the sun type of mentality for 24/7 coverage. We did, when we first started out, have an MSSP to help with us. It was great. They were a great partner. It was actually Expel, which was like kind of a startup that came out. Really awesome for people like us who are highly technical and wanted to create a lot of specialization around what we were doing with the way we created things with our SIM and our Intel feeds. So it was super great. After about 2 years, we were good to go. They helped us get to a point where we were like, oh, we've got it. We can do this 24/7 ourselves. So we had a location of a SOC that's located technically in Chicago, and then the other part of them being in Krakow in Poland. It's 24/7. Our staffing is pretty consistent with the model you would imagine in terms of your tier one analysis, is most of it's getting filtered out. So we get like maybe 8 billion logs year to date right now that we have to cull through with our Splunk and our glass, pane that we've got. That 8 billion goes down to maybe like 37,000 potential like signatures that popped. And we do our own detections and analytics as well. That we have a whole team for that. So we've got those pops that come up, and then it comes down to, it was like 70 low-level validated potential incidents that became 0 severe incidents. So kind of going through the funnel of how we go through things, everything goes into the eye of Sauron, right? For your Splunk, in our case, everyone's got something in the center of everything. We organize all that data. We feed through 300 different Intel feeds. After it pops out, our operational teams are the ones who, at that point, you're looking at mostly like tier 2 analysts that are working on something and our threat hunters. We have a big threat intelligence lean in. So we've got threat intelligence that's based out of Krakow. And then we also have some of them present in the Chicago, but now we're like geographically dispersed in the US.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like one of the major challenges of the SOC is that prolific number of alerts that comes in, and you guys have done a pretty good job of cutting that down.
Yeah. I mean, that's always the key, right? You got to balance that visibility. You want with great visibility, but you also want to balance like that the content is true positives. So it takes a little bit of time. And that's what that 2 years did for us of having an MSSP at the time, was it gave us the time to really cull that down and fine tune what the white noise was and turn that down. And so by the time we got done, we've got it really titrated down to really strong.
And have you, doing all this remotely, when you imagine a traditional SOC, it's folks huddled around monitors, right? And collaborating in that physical sort of way. Have you met any challenges with the need to do this SOCing remotely?
I would say there's a challenge, and one that we like face head on is that, and this is going to sound a little like, I don't know, like happy granola kind of feel, but our team is actually really happy and they're really a cool team. There's no drama. I've got over 50 people dispersed across the world. There's no beef with anyone. Everyone just has positive intent, doing our best job, and they're all really good. They're good at their job. So I know that that's like not normal. I've been around enough to know that's not normal. And so we all know it's not normal. And so we want to protect it. We're all protective about this team. And so trying to take that social cohesion that we've had when we were all huddled around a monitor and extrapolate that to a remote environment, it takes work. So we have consistent like Slack dialogues each week. We have a stand-up that we started doing on Mondays around the globe that we're all on. So all 50 plus of us are on this stand-up every morning on Mondays. It's called the Mos Eisley Cantina Talk. Everything's Star Wars themed. So the Mos Eisley kicks off. We always start off with music. We rotate different songs, but just keeping it fun and keeping us engaged. And so we had to extrapolate that. And then there's a thing for the week that you have to do where we like post a picture of someone's desk and say, whose desk do you think this is at home? And you had to try to figure it out based on what you knew about the person in profiling. So trying to like pull the fun and the closeness of a team out of that SOC mentality, it takes work. It takes effort, it takes follow through. And it is probably the biggest thing that we're committed to is not letting go of that. And we're really lucky that we've been able to do it so far.
Yeah, so obviously morale is something extremely important to you.
Yeah.
You're well aware of some of the dark news in certain elements of the security profession.
For diversity, man, it's horrible. Like all these women who are putting in their notice and saying, you know what, I'm just gonna stay at home now because I have to, and especially for minority women, and it's just it's horrifying. So we had to go and actually lean in there and be like, okay, how are we super taking care of the headspace? I think that's actually an app, but which we help them to use. But how do we take care of like the mentality of not just the morale, but also like, are they functioning okay with what they're doing? Not just minority women who are mothers, but also like, what about when you're single in COVID and you're sitting by yourself quarantined for so long? So we focused on the mental and people side majority. I would say that was like a big driver for us.
Yeah. Okay. That's tremendous stuff. I know we got to wrap up. Let me finish with one question. Like, what do you see any paradigm shift underway here in the way that security is done now, pre versus post COVID? I mean, some of the new risks that you may be facing might be, grow and become more commonplace. Or what are you thinking about, now versus then?
It's something you have to like kind of precariously walk. That security, you've been in the industry for a while. We don't change things easily. Like, once we have a change, we kind of latch on and don't let go for a while. So like the term like disruption came up and everybody loved it. We latched on and we kept it with us forever, right? And so like I would say you kind of have to acknowledge that I think you're going to have a large part of the security industry go right back in a rubber band effect to the way they used to be before COVID, like nothing happened. Go right back to butts and seats mentality, et cetera. But you're going to have a lot of people in the tech industry who are going to start to have to feel that there is a demand from top talent now because they've got a taste for remote life and they've got a taste for this freedom of being able to work from anywhere. And I think that that top like 10, 20% talent you've got in the industry, it's probably going to demand this kind of hybrid or remote mentality. So I think that that area in security is going to be a real interesting shift that takes place, and not everybody's going to capitulate to it. So we'll see how it goes.
Indeed, we'll check back in with you, Amanda Fennell, CSO of Relativity. Absolute pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.